احنا هلا عنا الجلسة السادسة للمؤتمر وتحت عنوان محو الأمية المالية وبناء القدرات. ويعني مثل ما احنا شايفين المشاركين بالجلسة أنشط منا، صاروا قاعدين على البانل، فبدي أعرف عليهم بشكل سريع جدا. لوسي كورتناي مديرة مؤسسة تحليل المال المعتمد ومدير الجلسة. ويليام طعم المدير الإقليمي لمنطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال إفريقيا مؤسسة التحليل المالي المعتمد. أنجس بلين مدير العمليات في فاروس للاستثمارات في مصر. وأيضا الدكتور غالب محمصاني نائب رئيس مجلس إدارة بورصة بيروت. وروبرت سينجلاتري مدير الفريق الفني بمشروع تطوير سوق رأس المال في الأردن. وائل النجار دائرة أول في سلطة دبي للخدمات المالية. أهلا وسهلا فيكم جميعا، وبنقدر أكيد نبدأ هاي الجلسة. تفضلوا.
Good afternoon, and first of all, may I thank our hosts and the Union of Arab Securities Authorities for their kind invitation to present on this panel. We've heard a lot over both days about ways to develop capital markets, and we've touched a few times on the importance of improving investor education. So I'm really excited to have such a prestigious panel with a wide range of experiences and thoughts and views on the matter. I'm going to ask them in a moment to briefly introduce themselves. I've got a number of questions for them, but we really want to hear from you today. So after my couple of questions, we're going to open up to the floor for your questions, comments to this distinguished panel. So William, can I ask you first to introduce yourself?
Thank you. So I'm William Tomei, the regional head of CFA Institute. So the CFA Institute decided to come closer to this region. And a year ago, we decided to open an office in Abu Dhabi to service the whole MENA region. Thank you.
Angus Blair of Pharos Investments in Egypt. And I want to say I'm very grateful to Jalil Tarif and his great team for the invitation to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy, and I would like to thank UASA and the GSC for inviting me to participate in such an important conference that addresses a number of topics that are very relevant to the region. Before I start, I would like to also make a disclaimer that the opinions that I express here are my own opinions and are not necessarily those of the DFSA. I work in the markets division in the DFSA, and I'm responsible for supervising market infrastructures. That's mainly the exchanges, the clearinghouse, and the CSD, the Central Securities Depository, that operate in the DIFC. Before that, I worked in the US for more than a dozen years, supervising the activities of broker-dealers, investment banks. That means conduct, sales practice, capital requirements, trading practices, issuance of securities, and so on. Thank you.
My name is Robert Singletary, and I'd like to thank the organizers for the invitation. I'm here today in my capacity as the technical team lead for the Capital Markets Development Project here in Jordan. This is sponsored by the EBRD. It's a 3-year project with a multi-million-dollar budget. We have 5 activity streams: legal and regulatory review, tax policy, restructuring and business processes for both the exchange and the depository here in Amman, looking at the regulatory processes for the Jordan Securities Commission, and lastly, the development of new products. So you can see that it's quite comprehensive. And we are struggling, or I shouldn't say struggling, we are addressing in real time many of the issues that are being discussed here during the conference. Our job is to help the Jordanian government implement the roadmap that was mentioned yesterday in the Prime Minister's speech, which sets out a path for developing the capital markets. It's quite a detailed document, 140-some pages. It's not a high-level type of piece. And so this is our role here and what we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. And my first question to each of the panel is, who should actually be responsible for investor education? Should it be regulators? Should it be governments through schools and colleges? Should it be the industry? Should it be industry professionals? So, Robert?
Thank you. I suppose that we in the project are looking at this question with regards from two different aspects. The first is sort of a whiteboard exercise. Theoretically, what looks good, and then secondly, what is practical, what's really doable. When we look at government being the sponsor, the question is really how engaged will the government be? How motivated will the government be? And when I say government, I mean the ministers and the Council of Ministers as opposed to, say, the Securities Commission. And then secondly, the Commission itself, industry, academia, what are those motivations? I think that's one thing to examine. And then secondly, what biases there may be in terms of who you select to prepare the curriculum, so to speak, and to actually deliver it. I'm sure my colleagues on the panel have more to say about this, and so I'll stop right there.
I think really all parties and all stakeholders are responsible for investor education. This is such an important topic, and it cannot be handled or addressed by just one entity or another. You can't say the government is responsible, the regulator is responsible, or the investment community are. It has to be a collaborative effort. And as part of that effort, people need to work with each other. They need to look at academic research and take it from there.
I fully agree with what was said, that it is the responsibility of everyone. We have to start by education, by training students and on what is investment, what is stock exchange, and then there is a role for regulation, there is a role for the government, for the administration, for the stock exchanges, and there is also within the firms and the commercial entities also a need for a second education to train the people and to create the culture of investment which doesn't exist in the Arab world, unfortunately.
Angus?
I want to actually add a little bit more color. I agree again with everyone. It's the job of everybody all the time, and it never stops. And it starts in schools. We discussed earlier the fact that Gordon Brown introduced financial education into the UK curriculum. Very important. It's the role of the markets themselves and all of the participants. And I have to say, we do not do a good job. In fact, I think we do a dreadful job in educating financial and improving financial literacy. And I give an example, which again I mentioned my colleagues in the panel in the break, the fact that in the UK, many of us may be familiar with people who undertake personal finance and give advice on pensions and so on. And I have people in Dubai chasing me on a regular basis when I was in New York, taking phone calls at 3 or 4 in the morning from people trying to manage my pensions until I told them to go away. The fact that these people are trying to sell expertise with no paperwork. And the fact that right now we have a crisis in the UK with an institution which has failed with over 200 million pounds, British pounds, gone missing, and an enormous problem right now in money laundering with Scandinavian banks, Danske Bank and Swedbank, that's going to become very significant, you'll see in the media. And of course, newspapers. You and I particularly will be familiar, being British, that many of the British newspapers, particularly Sunday newspapers, but the Financial Times also, have played a very big role in educating the general audience on a whole variety of issues related to what is an enormously broad financial sector, from personal finance through to privatizations, where very few of us can be experts more than a very narrow part of that spectrum. So everything, as I agree with my panelists, it's everyone's job to discuss it. We should insist that there's more information and more from certain participants particularly, and I mentioned as an investment banks, we're poor at it too. There's a lot that can be done where we can play a role, whether that's through seminars, but particularly through written material. And it is continuous, and it should never stop. And I think this is one of the most important elements that I think has been discussed in this conference, is how do we make the market ready and informed to make the right decisions on that massive financial spectrum. Thank you.
So at the Institute, at CFA Institute, we did not rely on everyone to start educating the wider population. You may know that we have a program, a beginner's program called Investment Foundation. It was priced very low, like $250. Still, some people couldn't access it in remote areas in the globe, but they had internet connection and they had a connection to the web. We made this program free of charge, and it's been growing exponentially. The last time I checked, we had 450% growth year on year in this program. What does it mean? It means that people across the globe are thirsty. They want to learn what they are having to deal with. Maybe they need to ask questions. Where is my pension? How is it managed? Will I have time to cover for my longevity risk? Maybe I will live longer than the government thought. Maybe the government lost lots of money when they were investing on my behalf and the crisis hit in 2008. By the way, the crisis was the crisis of trust. If you want people to invest, if you want people to live in dignity longer, they need to understand what is finance. We don't want them to be experts. If they want to be experts, they can continue on their own and go to master's degrees, etc., etc. Maybe the CFA program. But at least give the man on the street, the taxi driver, everyone, give them a minimum knowledge of what finance is. Because it's a beautiful industry, by the way. We made it look ugly by some personal interest here and there, but it's a beautiful industry. It's a place where you go and have a financing, a decent one, to build a house. It's a place where you go and get some financing to send your kids to university, to learn more. So the best way to protect investors, and don't get me wrong, we're partnering with governments, with stock exchanges, with every stakeholder in the economy to get this program to everyone on the street. So I think the best way to protect investors is to give them knowledge, unbiased knowledge, which means I'm not giving you knowledge to buy my product, which most of the industry players are tempted to do. I do an event, it's an educational event. At the end of the day, you have flyers, you have people pushing you to subscribe to this solution or to that one without showing you how many hidden fees you have. So this is our definition of protecting investors by giving them knowledge free of charge.
Thank you all, and it's great to have such a high degree of agreement. If you'll indulge me, I have just one more question that I'd like to ask. And this has come out of what I've heard and what I've learnt over the last 2 days. And that's the number of privately owned companies in the region, which I think makes it different to many of the developed markets that we may be used to. So when we're talking about investor education, are we talking about investors or are we talking about shareholders? And how should we best protect and educate, particularly the minority shareholders? And I'd like to ask the doctor to comment on that, please.
Excuse me if I have... details. هحكي بالعربي عن هالموضوع لأنه هيك يعني ظنيت إنه لازم تكون بالعربي. من أهم شيء المواضيع اللي بدها ثقافة وحماية هي صغار المستثمرين وأقلية المساهمين اللي هن نفسهم يعني حيكونوا المستثمر الكبير عنده من يدرس له ويعمل ما في يعني كتير خوف على ثقافته. بس إنما بالإضافة إلى الثقافة العامة للاستثمار نحن بحاجة إنه نحمي صغار المستثمرين وأن نؤمن حقوقهم وحقوق أقلية المساهمين. إنما يميز سوق الأسواق الأوراق المالية عن غيرها من الأسواق أن السوق نظامية يخضع المتعاملين فيها لقوانين وتشريعات معينة تهدف إلى حفظ حقوق كافة المساهمين وبالأخص صغارهم المستثمرين. إن صغار المستثمرين هم أكثر الشرائح تأثراً بتقلبات السوق وانخفاضاته، وهؤلاء هم من يتحمل عادة النسبة الأكبر من الخسائر المتلاحقة نتيجة تدني مستوى الخبرة والمعرفة بشؤون السوق وأحوال الشركات المساهمة، إضافة إلى جهل شائع في أوساط الأقلية من حملة الأسهم بتقنيات التحليل الفني والمالي للأدوات المالية العائدة للشركات المدرجة. وعلى الجهات الرقابية وأسواق رأس المال والوسطاء المعتمدين في البورصات وأعضاء مجلس إدارة الشركات ومدققي الحسابات الخارجيين وكافة أصحاب المصلحة توحيد جهودهم من أجل تمكين صغار المستثمرين من لعب دورهم على أكمل وجه وحفظ حقوقهم، إذ أن هذه الفئة من المساهمين تلعب دور إيجابي في زيادة كفاءة وسيولة الأسواق المالية. كما أن معظم الدراسات أظهرت أن البلدان التي تقدم إطاراً قانونياً لحماية صغار المساهمين تميل إلى امتلاك أسواق مالية أكثر قوة، لأن المستثمرين يكونون على استعداد لتحمل المخاطر في هذه الحالة. إن أنجح الوسائل لحماية المستثمرين الصغار من تقلبات أسواق الأسهم يكمن في توعية وتنمية وعيهم الاستثماري، وفي توحيد محافظهم الاستثمارية في محفظة يشرف عليها مختصون أو بانضمامهم إلى أحد صناديق الاستثمار لنفس الغرض. يجب العمل على توعية صغار المستثمرين على أهمية الاستعانة بالشركات المقدمة للخدمات والاستشارات المالية لتكون بمثابة الجهة الاستشارية للمستثمر الذي لا يتمتع بالخبرة الكافية في إدارة استثماراته المالية في الأسواق المالية، بحيث يكون المستثمر الصغير تحت مظلة إدارة محافظ، ما يساعد في تحمل تلك الشركات العبء في إدارة الأموال بدلا من المستثمر، فضلا عن حمايته من الوقوع فريسة للشائعات والأخبار المغلوطة التي يتداولها البعض بغرض رفع أو خفض سعر سهم معين، والنتيجة تكون خسائر فادحة يتحملها الجميع وخصوصا الصغار. يعني عمليا صغار المستثمرين لا يمكن قد ما درسوا لا يمكن أن يكونوا على معرفة ناضجة وكاملة بالسوق وبوضع كل سهم وبمدى جدية وفاعلية الاستثمار فيه. يحتاج إلى شركات متخصصة والحمد لله موجودة لهذا الغرض. لابد من الإشارة وعلى الجهات الرقابية أن تقوم بالتعاون مع الأسواق المالية بتعزيز التشريعات والأنظمة المالية بأدوات رقابية عملية على أرض الواقع، خصوصا فيما يتعلق بضرورة إفصاح الشركات عن البيانات والمعلومات الجوهرية، وإلزام الشركات بزيادة الشفافية بحيث يحصل جميع المستثمرين في نفس الوقت على بعض الحقائق الأساسية لاستخدامها في الحكم، ما إذا كانت الأوراق المالية لشركة معينة تمثل استثمارا جيدا أو لا، وذلك من خلال التدفق المستمر للمعلومات في الوقت المناسب. ويمكن للجهات الرقابية العمل على تعديل بعض القوانين والأنظمة، وخاصة تلك التي ترعى التصويت لاختيار مجلس الإدارة في الشركات المدرجة، بحيث تسمح بالتصويت على قانون نسبي بما يكفل تمثيل صغار المساهمين في مجلس الإدارة، أو تخصيص حصة معينة من أعضاء مجلس الإدارة لتكون ممثلة لصغار مستثمرين، لأنه كما نعلم حاليا أن المساهمين الكبار عادة لهم الأكثرية وانتخابات بنظام أكثرية عادي، فيأتون بجميع أعضاء مجلس الإدارة من فرد فئة، ويكون صغار المستثمرين لا من يمثلهم ولا من يعلمون بما يحصل فعليا في الشركة. لقد هذا الأمر بالنسبة للمصارف لحسن الحظ هناك بعض التعليمات والتنظيمات الجديدة التي تلزم المصارف بأن يكون لديها عدد معين من الأعضاء مجلس الإدارة الحياديين والمستقلين والخارجين عن نطاق المساهمين، وهذه خطوة جيدة، إنما أيضا لا تكفي لتمثيل صغار المساهمين. كذلك يمكن للجهات الرقابية العمل على سن قوانين تعطي المساهمين الصغار في الشركات حقوقا قانونية أوسع لجهة تمكينهم بطريقة أشمل من مراقبة قرارات الإدارة وإعطائهم إمكانية الطعن بتلك القرارات أمام القضاء المختص، طبعا ضمن شروط يقتضي حتى إيضاع وضعها لتلافي أي تجاوز أيضا في استعمال هذا الحق. ولا بد من الإشارة إلى أن قوانين الأنظمة المالية والتي هي شبيهة بمعظمها بين مختلف الدول تكفل حقوق الأقلية المساهمة في الشركة العامة أو ما يسمى بصغار المساهمين بشكل عام، إلا أن هذه الشريحة من المساهمين أصبحت مطالبة بلعب دور أكبر خلال انعقاد اجتماعات الجمعية العمومية، خصوصا في القرارات المتعلقة والمتخذة في تلك الاجتماعات المتعلقة بتحديد نسب التوزيعات واستراتيجية الشركات المساهمة خلال المراحل المقبلة، علما أن الإدارات التنفيذية للشركات المساهمة عندما تشعر أن صغار المستثمرين يلعبون دورهم في القرارات المتخذة خلال الجمعيات العمومية سيتخذون الحيطة والحذر في القرارات الاستثمارية التي تتعلق بعمل الشركة. وعلى مدققي الحسابات الخارجيين الذين يقومون بتدقيق البيانات المالية للشركة أن يلعبوا دورهم كاملا، وأن يعرفوا أنهم مسؤولون أمام جميع المساهمين وليس أمام البعض منهم أو أمام مجلس إدارة الشركة فقط. فلا يجب إرضاء مجلس إدارة على حساب المساهمين الصغار الذين عليهم أيضا أن يشاركوا بفعالية ودون كلل في اجتماعات الجمعية العمومية ويكونوا على علم تام بما يحدث داخل الشركة. وعلى أعضاء مجلس إدارة أخيرا أن يعمل بأن تكون اجتماعات الجمعية العمومية منبرا للنقاش وليس منبرا لتمرير قرارات مجالس إدارة الشركة. يعني بدأ تغيير بالتعامل اليومي والعادي في مجالس الإدارات وفي الجمعيات العمومية للشركات. وشكرا.
Thank you. I'd now like to open to the floor for questions. So we have a gentleman here right at the front. Can we have a microphone? Can you introduce yourself before you ask a question? Thank you.
I understood from Mr. Tommy that the CFA has a public program that is open for anyone to go online. I tried to go, I didn't find it. Maybe you can assist or you can distribute this, because I believe this is very much important to educate public people how to start thinking whenever they want to invest. Back to what Dr. Ghalib said, because I totally agree with everything he said, but I need to emphasize that public accountants, external auditors, are to provide their opinion on the financial situation of a company. Whenever we are dealing with a company in a financial market, it's not only their financial position, whether it's fairly represented in their financial statements or not. We need to educate investors on different parameters related to the planning, proper planning, to the proper valuation, to the proper governance, to the proper whether this company is using innovation or not, whether it is on digitization or not. There are several parameters. We believe there are around 10 parameters that any investor needs to know about. So I believe the role of any stock exchange is to start creating this, because what is being held only is ethics and inside information not to deal with. This is great and this is important, but what is important as equal is to educate these investors on the parameters in order to make sure before they invest, they know where are they investing. And this needs not only the auditor, it needs other professional advisors and providers to provide their opinion on these parameters that I just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. William, can I ask you to take that first, please?
So thank you for mentioning it. The program is called Investment Foundations. So if you Google or search CFA Investment Foundations, you'll find it. It's free of charge, and there's a certification at the end. So if you pass the 100 hours of study and you do an online exam and you receive the certification. Now, thank you for your question because it reminded me that we are translating it into Arabic. So there will be no excuse for someone where you say that the English language is a barrier. It can even go further to places where you can only read it in Arabic and get your own financial literacy. And I would add to what you mentioned into investors' rights. We need to train people to ask for their rights. Whether you have one stock or 100 in a company, and I like the fact that we mentioned minority shareholders' rights, you have to access the accounts. They should be audited by an independent auditor. Most of the scams happened when the auditor was not independent, or we hired an auditor after a nice audit, and he was related to some of the managers, etc., etc. So we need to train people on their rights. They need to know them, and they need to act them. And they shouldn't be shy because a government has a big stake in a company, because one influential family has a big stake in a company, that I cannot, as a minority shareholder, come forward and ask for some accounts. And ask, what is this doing on your balance sheet? Why you have so many acquisitions that are not related to your main activity, etc., etc. And definitely this goes through education and free of charge and honest and transparent education. Investment foundations. And I'll stay here at the conference so you can, and we have a stand just here. When you exit this door, we have a stand also. All our publications are available there free of charge. Thank you.
Angus, do you have anything to add from your point of view?
Yeah, I would. First of all, I'd like to commend the CFA for doing tremendous work. And they do it all through the financial services industry, really tremendous. What I'd say, though, it's quite interesting, your point in asking the question, in that if you look at the markets of this region, the vast majority of trading is undertaken by small shareholders who are speculative, who in the main don't do much homework in their investments. And it's a learning lesson. We still have that all over in many markets across the world. There's nothing new. But I remember going to the Muscat stock market in the mid to late 90s and seeing taxi drivers rushing out of their taxis to go and invest in the stock market. And for quite a period in the Saudi stock market, it was all about volumes and speculative trading and intraday trading based on speculation. Now, I'm not condemning that, but again, we come here and it sounds very worthy, but it's a long-term process, and it's not easy. And I think that one of the issues I think that would help is for us to encourage our media in a time when we're losing newspapers to ensure that the remaining media cover the markets well and in depth. And I know that, for example, the EU, I live in Egypt, a number of Western embassies have been training journalists to report more accurately, particularly in finance. And luckily you have obviously Reuters and Bloomberg doing their part to try to disseminate information within markets too. But it isn't easy. As I said, it's long term. There's no one solution. But encouraging also, I think, not just newspapers, but national television stations to also report sensitively and informatively on the markets would be useful too, rather than just broad brush, shares rose X% in one day, and try to do some analysis on what's really going on. But it's multi-layered, and again, what I said earlier, we all have to play a part.
Yeah, I think the issue here is not necessarily just investment education. I think the unilateral thinking that there's a magic bullet or a magic solution or one or two items that resolve the issue is not necessarily the way to think about it. This is a whole ecosystem. So investor education is one component of it. Corporate governance is another component. Trading practice is another component. With investor education, how do you go about doing that? So it's easy to sit down and say the exchange should do so and so, or the regulators should do so and so. Now, how is the exchange going to deliver and educate the investor? How will that actually be implemented? Will it be done through calls, or is it going to be done through an internet, through a website? How is that going to actually be implemented? What is the academic research that says on that? I was just talking to a colleague of mine yesterday who said that according to a recent report, most or a good percentage of the traditional investor education is not actually working. And that what might actually work is targeted investor education. And you start by actually introducing investor and finance principles and concepts to high school students and to universities. And then the second tier of people to address are retirees. Now, how do you address that? How do you teach the high school students and university students about finance? Would it be people from the outside of the industry, or would it be the teachers and the professors themselves? How do you create the curriculum? Is it just academia who create the curriculum, or should there be participation by the governments and the regulators and the financial institutions, so that I am, as a student who getting educated, I understand about the different products. I can differentiate when somebody is calling me via cold call and selling me the moon, and so on. So it has to be a systemic approach to it. There are some things that I can address on the short term, but the crux has to be a long-term thinking, and it has to be a structural process to address that. And investor education is just one small component of a bigger system.
Thank you. Robert?
Just to follow up on a few points that Wael just made, I agree completely that it's very important to understand who your target audience is. Are you speaking to the older generation, or are you speaking to the younger generation? And when you're speaking to each generation, how is it that people absorb the information? What makes them enthusiastic about the subject matter? If any of you have teenagers, you know that it's very difficult these days to get them to read a book, but they love to watch YouTube videos. And so you have to understand sort of what grabs the audience's attention in terms of the way that the information is presented. I'd also like to follow up on a few points that the gentleman made. When it comes to financial literacy, we're really talking about three broad groups, in my opinion. We're talking about investors, and Lucy, you're right, shareholders. We're talking about financial management of companies. And in the earlier panel, we talked about family-owned companies. I think some of us would be surprised how little literacy exists with the CFOs of the family-owned enterprises when it comes to the capital markets, because they don't have to deal with this day in and day out. It's not part of their remit. And then the third category would be, of course, the market professionals. With regards to investors, and I'll try to make this short, there are really four stages, I think, where the knowledge comes into play. The first stage is, what do I need to know about my financial choices, just generally? The second stage is, what do I need to know when I'm actually making the investment? And so, for example, this would be a sensitivity to fees and how this cuts into my return on my investment. What do I need to know while I'm holding my investment? And this goes back, Lucy, to your point about shareholders. How do I monitor what's happening inside my company? And then lastly, what do I need to know when I think I want to sell? Now, the knowledge set for all those four stages is fairly cross-cutting, but in each one of those situations, the specific knowledge that the investor needs to have, I think, is particular. So in terms of when we devise the curriculum, I think we need to be looking at the entire investment cycle in terms of what it is that people need to have in their knowledge set.
Thank you. You raised some really interesting points there. And I think that demonstrates that it's not one size fits everybody. Can I ask, there's a gentleman there. Can we get a microphone? There's a gentleman there with his hand.
اسمي محمود صمور، أعمل في مجال الاستثمار والتمويل. سأتكلم باللغة العربية. الواقع دكتور توما أشرت إلى حماية حقوق الأقلية. وفي مجال الاستثمار هؤلاء الأقلية خاضعين دوما إلى قرارات مجلس الإدارة ولا رئيس الهيئة العامة الذي يقرر ما يريد بما لا يريد المساهمون. هناك في كثير من الهيئات، سواء الهيئات الرقابية من النزاهة إلى هيئة الأوراق المالية إلى دائرة مراقب الشركات، التي هي هيئات ناظمة رقابية ولها دور في حماية حقوق المساهمين. وإنني أتوجه بالسؤال: من هم اللاعبين الرئيسيين في أسواق رأس المال؟ هم مجموعة من المتعاملين المضاربين ما بين بعضهم البعض. إذا نظرت إلى السوق المالي الأردني ما بعد سنة 2008 إلى الآن 2019 ووجدت التحليل الفني والمالي لهذه الشركات، ستجد الكثير منها undervalued either in terms of technicality or investment policies or whatever. هنا الأمر متعلق ليس بمحو أمية المستثمر بقدر ما هو من هو المستثمر، وأيضا ما هي دور الجهات الرقابية بحماية هؤلاء المستثمرين. وسؤالي أيضا ل Capital Markets Conference Enhancing Transparency and Financial Innovation: ما هي الانوفيشنز اللي موجودة في أسواق رأس المال لمعالجة المشاكل الاقتصادية التي تواجه المنطقة بشكل عام في الشركات المتعثرة، في عملية إعادة هيكلة الاقتصاديات، وخاصة وأن الحكومات هي التي تعاني من عجوزات سواء بالإصدارات، السندات، أو في أسواق رأس المال. هنا السؤال والمحور الأساسي: ما هو دور أسواق رأس المال في معالجة المشاكل الاقتصادية ومعالجة مشاكل المستثمرين في المنطقة العربية؟ سأكتفي بذلك، وشكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you. There's two questions there. So can I ask Dr. Anwar to take the first one, which was about the...
What I wanted to say, I mean, certainly there is the problems raised by Sir is concern all the aspects of the stock market and the financials and the general economic problems also, and the mechanisms operation of the companies and the non-stock companies. Now, of course, this to be solved and perfect, it is nowhere is like that. But all these regulators have to do everyone's job progressively according to the needs to reach what would be to better and to make better all this situation. And as far as the financial market authorities, their role is to regulate the stock exchange but the general economic problems, it is not their role, at least in the countries I know, to handle. This is the role of the government, the role of the ministry, concerned ministries to deal with these problems.
Yeah, I mean, the topics you raised are really valid, and the questions are what I would call loaded questions, because they address some serious topics and concerns that need to be addressed. In my opinion, a healthy capital market reflects the true valuation of the economy and the status of the economy. If the capital market is not reflecting what's happening in the economy that we have an issue. And as a regulator, I need to look at what's causing the capital market to undervalue or overvalue the entities that are being traded. I need to look at the kind of people who participate and play in the market. Is the market or the market rules are not fit for purpose? Are they in some way designed to favor one class of investors or one class of stakeholders over another? So this is something that requires political as well as definitely a regulatory regime here. I mean, I've heard stories about markets in the same country where you have two exchanges on two different cities, and there are huge arbitrage opportunities for the prices of the same company that's being sold at two different markets. I mean, that is a reflection of something not working right, where there's information flow between the markets in the same country, or the exchanges in the same country for the same company are diverging from each other. So a market where you only have big and major players participating is an indication that the ecosystem is not working right. Now that goes into minority shareholder rights, that looks at how the broker dealers are talking and advising their customers, that talks about how the investment managers and the asset managers, you know, the level of sophistication and education that they have. And you know, it's a big issue. One of the issues I always have is these guys are professional investors. They don't need to. We don't need to worry about them. Of course, we need to worry about them, because a lot of the people who lost money in the financial crisis were financial investors. And a financial investor has two components: one, you know, high net worth, and the other is sophistication and understanding. And a lot of people, they talk to customers, say, "How much money do you have?" And the onboarding is very shallow, and they take the customer's word for it without any third-party independent verification and in-depth analysis of what that customer really has. And the most important part is they don't know what the customer knows, whether even the customer has a financial advisor. That onboarding process, that effort at the beginning, if it's not done, then you're going to have people who basically are going to be easily swayed, and you're going to have markets that are not going to be healthy or deep enough. And as an investor from the outside, I would sit there and say, why would I play in that market? Why would I participate in that market? There's no clarity, and accordingly, I don't need to kind of mess around with it and let it be the way it is.
Thank you. Angus, can I ask you perhaps to elaborate a little bit on the point that was made about the technical analysis and valuations?
I'm glad you raised that. I have to say, some of your questions might have been more valid yesterday in the opening session, last night in corporate governance, or this morning in terms of capital market updates, rather than this panel, but it's still relevant. One issue where I might take a different opinion from you is when you note that technical analysis would indicate to you that a stock is cheap. I see across the whole region an enormous reliance on technical analysis rather than on fundamental analysis. This is partly related to some of your issue. And it is problematic, and I think it's part of the problem in the region where there is an over-reliance upon technical analysis. You should be looking at the fundamentals of a company, and we should be encouraging that, because then you create a long-term investment culture, especially for long-term savings instruments like pensions and insurances, of which there is far too little investment in the region in long-term savings instruments. And it's to the market's detriment that that is not the case. And I think that a move to understand the better valuations of stock is actually more important. And one issue that you mentioned following on from that about government, about talking about the capital and encouraging investment, part of this is the government putting the framework in place to give trust. When I started covering emerging markets in 1993 after covering the UK, I was put in charge of all of Southern Europe and the Middle East, North Africa. And at the same time, Central and Eastern Europe was being developed, was coming out of behind the Iron Curtain. The region has not developed as quickly as other regions. for a whole variety of reasons, some of which I can't go into because I don't mention these things in public, or it's not wise to mention them in public. But one of them is economic, in that if there isn't good economic governance, it doesn't provide the right structure to encourage capital to remain. And every year, across all of this region, several $100 billion flows out every year into usually Western markets. And you see it in sovereign wealth funds, you see it in high net worth individuals. That is an issue of trust, as well as the development of markets, or the holding of assets, the majority of assets in a very small number of families, usually in a number of countries. That is a long-term issue, but it should have been tackled already. In Egypt, you see where in the last 2.5 years we had a devaluation, where there's technically now very good economic growth, tremendous growth, but it's not trickling down. And you see that in the PMI survey of business sentiment, which remains negative. It should already by this point have been positive. And again, everything is more multi-layered. We can't try to simplify some of these issues, because perhaps we should take, I'll speak to my friend Jalil Tarif, to maybe on another conference, is to maybe do some workshops on very specific issues that can then be taken out as policy document into the wider markets to try to encourage some further change. So that's where I think that we should be. Much of the lack of development of capital markets lies at the door of the region's governments and the leaders, who really need to know that the capital markets play a vital role in the health of the economy, to encourage the circular movement of capital and to encourage innovation in financial products. This is a region which even basic financial products remain in scarcity, of mortgages and mortgage finance, insurance products, as I've said, pension funds and so on, all of which this region needs enormously. So perhaps on another occasion we can talk more in depth about it. Thanks.
Thank you. We're running up against the clock, so I think we have time for just one brief question. Gentlemen?
شكرا لكم. محمد البلوشي من سوق مسقط الأوراق المالية. شدني محور الأمية العالمية وبناء القدرات. محور مهم. أعتقد اللاعب الأساسي في هذا الموضوع يكمن فيما يتعلق بدور التكاملي ما بين المؤسسات التعليمية والمؤسسات المنظمة للقطاع، وأيضا المؤسسات التي تعمل في هذا القطاع. لدينا تجربة في سوق مسقط الأوراق المالية فيما يتعلق بنشر الوعي. ربما نتقاطع أو نتشارك مع أسواق المنطقة في هذا الأمر. عملنا كثير من الزيارات الطلابية، الحملات التوعوية، لكن أعتقد إذا لم تكن هناك مشاركة حقيقية ما بين المؤسسات لن نصل إلى يعني ردم الهوة المعرفية في هذا القطاع. أحد المتحدثين أشار إلى أننا لابد نصل إلى سائق التاكسي أن يكون عنده معرفة فيما يتعلق بالاستثمار أو مستقبل ما بعد التقاعد على سبيل المثال. كيف نصل إلى هذا المستوى؟ كيف نصل إلى هذا الأمر في أسواق المنطقة؟ لدينا تحديات أعتقد بتكون كثيرة، لكن مطلوب من المؤسسات الرسمية أنها تشكل تعاون مع الأسواق بحيث أنها تصل إلى هذا الأمر. أيضا هل نحتاج في أسواق المنطقة إلى نوع من التنسيق المشترك بحيث أن تكون هناك حملات منسقة، قد تكون منسقة أو تكون حملات يعني مبرمجة ممنهجة لغرس هذه الثقافة، لغرس هذه الثقافة الاستثمارية وللردم الهوة المعرفية في هذا الجانب. شكرا لكم.
Thank you. William, can I ask you to...
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning financial literacy and financial culture. yes, we have to start early, maybe at schools, actually for sure at schools, as the same way as we explain to students how their body functions, how nature functions, planets, etc. We should tell them they are part of an economy, how their parents are saving for their futures, where they should save, etc. So I totally believe it starts at a very early age, and you'll be surprised how school pupils can be better investors than some adults. So if we start early, it's a culture. We don't want to influence their lives. They might be working in architecture later on, but they still need the financial market and a bit of understanding to protect themselves, but also to improve the outcomes for their lives, so they have the better future, better education, etc. So yes, I would never insist enough on schools, universities, regulators, investors, pension fund managers, sovereign wealth funds. Sovereign wealth funds are investing in the future of the nation. This is the future of the nation. Understanding how we can involve, understand the products that are sold to us, and actually they shouldn't be sold. These are our needs to have a better future. We should be investing, having total transparency. So all stakeholders you mentioned are concerned, and this should be on the top list of what we need to do. And this is why we are partnering with all the stakeholders that you mentioned, because we cannot alone do it. The regulators cannot do it alone. And if we leave the financial product sellers do it, we will be in big troubles. Because they will teach you only what you need to understand to sign on that contract without reading the footnotes and the embedded and hidden fees. So thanks again for your question.
Thank you. Robert, you just have the last word on this briefly.
Well, thank you for that. Just with regards to your comment and your question, I think it's who develops the curriculum, how does it get transmitted to the audience, and then thirdly, how do you measure progress? With regards to the curriculum, I think when we leave it to academia alone, it tends to be a little bit dry. When we leave it to the regulator alone, it's only about risk. When we leave it to the industry alone, it's not about risk. And so the curriculum needs to be even-handed, and I agree with your idea about having it being done in a team fashion. In terms of getting it done, my experience, having been involved in many projects, is that the donors will help you to develop your program, but they are not very enthusiastic about paying for the actual dissemination. And the reason for that is the third issue, measuring impact. It's very difficult over time to measure the impact of financial literacy programs on an objective basis. Really, you can do baseline surveys plus annual updates. That's one way. But at the bottom line, at the end of the day, and this is the end of it, I would measure it by the penetration of the capital markets into the economy as measured by participation by households. So the latest Fed Reserve study in the United States has 51% of the households in the United States own securities either directly or indirectly through investment funds or pension funds. So the goal is not 100%. I consider 51% for an emerging market to be something like nirvana. So that is sort of the goal. But penetration into the households at the end of the day is what we can use to measure the effectiveness of these kind of campaigns you're talking about. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you. And we're right out of time now. So may I ask you to thank our esteemed panel for their valuable contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Thanks.